Make with listening to BMIR 94.5 FM, the voice of the man.
Says Danger is funny, and I'm sure a couple others. And in it are pretty much every single piece of paper that is really important, like IDs and passport and money and commissary tickets.
So if somebody has this bag, what should they do with it?
Bring it to 345 in Esplanade, Burners Without Borders, and hand it off to somebody and tell them it's for Weston, because they'll all know me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Weston, and good luck.
Thank you, BMIR.
And this is Momus with a tender and also rather long song about... well, actually, before that, I've got one other announcement to make, which is that the Center Camp Cafe desperately needs volunteers right now until 3 p.m. tomorrow. If you're around anytime between now and 3 and can volunteer at Center Camp Cafe, please do. Please, please, please do. This is Momus and Bishonen.
I was born in the town of Paisley in early 1960 and placed in the care of an old eternal bachelor, a strict disciplinarian, a passionate antiquarian. His collection of myths and legends was spectacular. As a younger man, he'd been to see Japan, where a master in a white kimono taught him. In a shining moment, the myth of the Bishonen, the youthful hero doomed to fall like blossom. And how could I forgive the ugly fugitive who brought me up according to a fantasy? For when the old man stared at me, he drowned in evil beauty, thinking of the early death in store for me. He taught me to be good with words. He bought me ceremonial swords. Pale and frail, with many male admirers, I was promised by my father a retainer for a partner, so loyal that nothing could divide us. Shocked by my suggestion that I'd rather have a woman, my stepfather replied I had no choice. This man would cut his entrails open, protecting his Bishonen, he informed me in a solemn, trembling voice. How could I disobey that surreptitious gay who brought me up according to a fantasy? For when the old man stared at me, he drowned in evil beauty, thinking of the early death in store for me. So me and my retainer encountered many dangers on travels through the north and through the south. We ripped open the bellies of many famous bullies, and our reputation spread by word of mouth. In the mountains of Morocco, we stopped and shared a bottle with a blind old man with a bearded, bandaged face. And though the sun had sunk and the man was very drunk, he seemed to speak with my stepfather's voice, saying, how could you forget the aging martinet who brought you up according to a fantasy? Your softness and fragility, your feminine grace and delicacy, be the death of me. Surprised at 28 to find myself so late, changing from a boy into a man. I'm starting to feel guilty that nobody has killed me early as my stepfather had planned. I found myself a girl who stopped roaming the world. My retainer has gone to be a mercenary. Now I work in a merchant bank. I'm well liked by the senior ranks. And behind my back, the juniors call me Fanny. How can I placate the ugly reprobate who brought me up according to fantasy? For when the old men stare at me, they drown in evil beauty, thinking of the early death in store for me. I stay awake some nights when my wife turns off the lights and starts breathing regularly next to me. And I think of fallen petals, bodies pierced by metal, and how I'll never now fulfill my destiny. Father, spare my shame. Let me pass my name to a boy with greater beauty and more bravery. For if I have a son, I'm gonna raise him to die young and lay him in the grave that you prepared for me.
Been to Burning Man or seen the temple being built or burnt. I think about 14 years ago I had found a scrap material from a toy factory that was building, they made dinosaur puzzles. And the drop from that factory was interesting, and I thought, well, maybe I'd make something out of it. And I had been to Burning Man once before and just pretty much played around with artistic junk, you know, making a couple pieces, but not really getting my teeth in anything. And I had this material and I thought I would build something. And I've been working with this young kid who had been, you know, in and out of trouble and was just blossoming. You know, I'd become like a role model kind of father figure to him. And he was like a Shakespearean actor, a sword swallower, a sword cutter, a sword fighter, you name it, and really talented kid. And the last thing he said to me, is there anything you need me to do? And I said, no, we're done. And he took off with a couple of buddies on a motorcycle that night, and racing the moon, was killed at 140 miles an hour on a Ducati. So at the funeral, the kids that I was working with had never had death. It was the first time for them. And they said, well, Michael would have wanted us to go to the desert. And so we agreed. It was like 2 weeks before the event. So we continued staging and came up. And we were going to build something. And we didn't know what we were building. We were just going to build something. And because of the fact that Michael Heflin was killed on a motorcycle, these kids, as they were working, were grieving and manifesting their grief through the build. And that when we were finished, about 1,000 people had come and put names in it just spontaneously. And we burned it on a Thursday night. And that was a pretty good sized burn for amateurs. You know, we had never done anything like that. And like I said, we didn't know what it was. And Burning Man asked me to come back the next year and build a temple. So I thought, well, what would I dedicate a temple to, not having a personal religion? And I thought of somebody who'd had, say, their mother or father commit suicide and not be able to have them buried in a cemetery. I thought, you know, at Burning Man, we embrace a lot of things that the outside world doesn't. Although I think our impact on the outside world is starting to be felt. I think now we go on a tirade. The world's running out of energy. It's running out of love. There's a whole lot of things happening that the Burning Man community rises to. You know. But with that being said, so I thought, okay, I'll dedicate the center of the temple to suicide, for those people who had lost their son or daughter, that they could come in and not have to go into the shadows of the temple, but go to the most sacred place. So the most painful loss should be reserved for the most sacred place. And that year, the first temple, I called it the Temple of Tears, and you can imagine 10, 20,000 people crying.
What year was that?
Those things I can never remember my years. You know, I know how old I am, but that's about it.
Okay, that's fine.
It was a long time ago. And what happened that year is maybe 500 people put names in the center, and about 10,000 people put names in the temple. And the next year I said to Larry Harvey, who's the founder of the Burning Man event, I said to Larry, I said, listen, I think I'm going to do a comedy club next. You know, because there were thousands of people crying. So the next year we called it the Temple of Joy. And the same thing happened. People came and grieved and mourned, but they brought their father's favorite joke.
Wonderful.
You know, they brought, I don't know if you've dealt with anybody with cancer in a hospital, but they brought a big banner from their mother's hospital room where they said, "This food tastes like dog food." You know, and here's the mother in the hospital bed, you know, and everybody signed it and brought it out. So there's a mixture of joy and grief in the temple, you know. You asked me if I've talked to a lot of people and answered a lot of the same questions. The thing is, I tell the crew every year when we build a temple that we're building it for one person, not 50,000, okay? If we're building it for 50,000, you can see without a camera, I can tell you on the radio or over the air, I'm 5'6". I certainly couldn't handle the intimidation of 50,000 people, but one I can handle. And the questions that you're answering are the first questions I've heard, just like you're the first person I built a temple for. So it never gets old for me to talk about it. It sounds sometimes recorded, but it's always the same. It comes from me to you.
Well,
You understand that?
I do, and I think it's important to understand what the genesis of certain art or certain ideas are.
Yeah.
And that was a very revealing story to understand how it began.
Yeah.
Now, you've been doing this for quite a number of years. We're here on the playa in 2012. You've been here, you've been away, you've come back. What would you say is the significance of the Temple of Juno this year?
In the United States right now, women's rights are being attacked by right-wing conservatives. Juno was the goddess who protected marriage and women. And I've never used the temple as a platform to address things outside of the playa. But it's so obvious to me and all of us that this is a year of fertility, and it's about women and for women. And women need all help they can get right now. You know, their rights and their privacy are being attacked and torn down by right-wing conservative fundamentalists, and they need protection from that.
Was that that realization and that significance? When did that come to you? I mean,
It actually is kind of lengthy explanation, but I was laying in kind of almost a dream state. And over the years, I've talked to thousands of people. I mean, literally tens of thousands of people out here at the temple. And last year, I didn't build a temple, but I was told about the writing on the temple. A woman had written, "I've had a miscarriage or an abortion, and I miss you, and I wished I hadn't had to do it." And underneath it, someone from the community wrote, "I understand that. I'm all right, go on with your life." And the community was healing that person, not me. And I thought about I visualized, and it was really dumb of me, I thought of a woman who was deranged and who committed suicide, who had been institutionalized, and that I was talking to her son about his mother and saying, she's okay now, she's at peace. And the reality is that one of my close friends here on the playa's mother was insane and committed suicide. And I have told him that his mother was okay. So that was where the whole idea of Juno came in, is to be supportive of someone who's lost their mother.
Well, and tragic loss is a difficult thing to overcome, and I think one of the best ways to address that is through friends, supportive community, and loved ones, and people you've never met before that might come up and say those random, I'm with you, and
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah, when we first did the temple, I talked to people about having a child who being with somebody all their life who had a miserable life and took their life, and next to that person was somebody who had a child who was only here for what seemed like moments and had a wonderful life. And I said, in death, share that person with that person that had a miserable life. I said, if you don't believe in spiritual sharing, then just your physical presence next to somebody whose mother was miserable all her life and committed suicide, and you had a son that you lost, if you just put your hand on that person's shoulder, is enough support. It's invisible.
Yeah, it's it's a nonverbal. It doesn't have to be verbal.
Yeah, well, we used to be animals.
Yeah.
At one time we had more senses, and then we started using perfume and BMWs and fancy clothes to keep people away from us. And out here, a BMW or a Ferrari or fancy perfume is for naught. Meaningless. So we all kind of get exhausted and wiped out and stripped of, you don't know if you're sitting next to somebody that's worth $10 million or $20 or $30 million or $5. We're all equal. And that equal translates into equal sharing of pain and joy. It equalizes all of us. I was sitting with a woman, I was just talking with someone about another interview about, I was talking to a man whose son had OD'd on heroin a year ago, and I was talking to a woman yesterday whose son had OD'd 2 weeks ago. And we were out on the playa. I took her out in the golf cart to talk to her away from a lot of noise. And we were talking about her son having mixed 2 wrong drugs together and OD'd. And as we were talking about that, and I mean, you're in the presence of somebody who just lost her son, and we're both I'm trying to understand her suffering or be friends with her or listen to it. And right then, a gigantic, and I mean gigantic, chicken drives by, and we both start laughing. And funerals are, if we can, out there right now in the world where you people are listening to this, close your eyes and picture a funeral. It's gray carved granite tombstones with bronze fixtures, somber colors, And out here, someone goes to bury their child in the temple or put their ashes in the temple. Right next to them is someone dressed up in a Donald Duck costume with glow sticks coming out of their nose and singing Yankee Doodle Dandy to some drum and bass music that's too loud to even imagine.
Well, certain cultures actually have more festive funerals.
Yeah.
They don't have the somber black tie and black suit kind of affair. Maybe that's something we should think more about.
Bill Cotting, who worked with me on the crew, if I can get Bill to he addressed it so eloquently why people need this and works with it, that I'd like Bill to come in. Bill is one of the crew members that's worked with me on all the temples, a dear friend.
We're going to go find Bill, and he has been found. David's bringing him back over.
An interesting addition to describing how the temple's built, just for a minute while we're waiting for my friend Bill Cotting to answer a lovely question. The thing that's so unique about building a temple is that we build it with people in wheelchairs. We've got someone on the crew that can only stand for a half an hour a day. And that half an hour contribution is what makes the temple so elegant. We could build the temple with 20 able-bodied, quote, able-bodied carpenters, but with 90 committed, crazy, wonderful, loyal friends and crew, we build it and it has a much more it's much richer. You know, the the thing that was so phenomenal for me, I mean, I have a couple things that I take great pride in building the temple with the crew. One is that I provide a clean and safe environment for people in recovery. And my crew honored that so much. I mean, there's 90 people working in the desert for 3 weeks. And I would say the total consumption of alcohol was maybe a 6-pack of beer and possibly a bottle of wine. Their reason for working was they were so committed and so devoted to the project and to one another and to respect that these are people.
You had a responsibility.
Yeah, and these people honored it so fully.
And it depends on your reason for working on that temple. People tend to work on this project for very good reasons, right? And I think that tends to attract a different kind of spirit than maybe a project which is just intended to be frivolous or visceral or something like that. This tends to involve people that get drawn to this project who have really good hearts.
Personally motivated for various reasons.
Absolutely.
Now, one thing that this brings to mind is, how are these wonderful people chosen? How do do they come to you randomly? I mean, is there an interview process?
You ever heard of a lucky punch?
Yes.
That's what we got.
Okay.
We're just fortunate. The people from all over the world have come to this project. We have Bill Cotting has set up a computer world for people to access us. Bill when he was doing it, he spent probably 4 hours a day on the computer answering emails from all over the United States and the world. The temple crew is inclusive, not exclusive. You know, so whoever wishes to work on it can.
So, Bill, why don't we drill down a little bit? What are some of the best? Okay.
I want to feed that one thing to Bill.
Sure.
The question of what you brought up earlier in the interview about some people having a religion and not.
Yeah.
And how would you address that? And how this works?
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying that.
Would you please?
Absolutely. I was saying that a lot of these people that are here at Burning Man tend to be alternative thinkers. So a lot of them don't have a structured religion that they necessarily have that they can fall back on to help them through life transitions, such as mourning or weddings or anything like that. So this temple is it's a great place. It's for people who are religious or not. And so it's a great place for people that may not have some other structured way to express their grief or express their joy to do it here. It's a very much of a non-denominational, non-religious, non-specific temple.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and it doesn't take any instruction booklet to understand how to best use the temple. It seems to be intrinsic.
Absolutely. So, and back to the question of crew selection, this is really interesting because we do get these emails and referrals from all over the world, and friends of friends and all this kind of stuff. And we don't. It's very much of a self-selection process. We get some very impassioned emails from people who write 3 pages explaining what this project means to them and why they want to be on the crew and what they're going to do for us. And it's apparent from some of these emails immediately that these are good people with good hearts. Those are the easy ones.
Yeah.
Some of the other selection happens as a self-selection process. I used to like telling the story that people would come up to the temple back in the days when we just built it. We didn't have necessarily as organized of a crew, and people would come walking up the temple with their bags ready and their saws in hand, and they would say, I want to go up there and help you frame that top level. They want to be up there, with the crane, and so David would say, fantastic, could you please pick up some garbage off the ground? They would go pick up some garbage, and looking all frustrated, and they would come back and say, okay, I'm done with it, now I want to go up there and build. And David would say, could you please sort those stairs in increasing size? And that wasn't intentional, but that kind of thing was a self-selection process. The people that could tolerate that became good people on the crew. The people that couldn't tended to drift away because maybe they weren't doing it for someone other than themselves.
Right. They weren't getting the satisfaction or the objectives that they had, which may be very self-serving.
Absolutely, absolutely.
We did a paper temple one year, and pardon me. In one of the tents, I had 5 major framing carpenters. You know, the kind of carpenters that their waist has an implant from their tool belt. I mean, these are badass carpenters sitting in a tent with a pair of scissors cutting out little paper flowers to glue onto the paper temple. And it was the most beautiful thing in the world. So skill levels are one of the things that the temple addresses. We had a Stephen Crow, an Irishman, came and worked on the crew, and was a builder, which brings me to a political issue separate, but Stephen could cut a piece of wood so gracefully with a chop saw that I stopped the entire crew and made them look and watch him cut a piece of wood, because he did it with such finesse, years of experience. And I mean, this is a man who is a builder and did it with such courtesy that, you know, I wanted the rest of the crew to learn from that. We have people that, you know, we're very safety conscious, so, you know, safety is our #1 issue, courtesy is second, and safety is number 3. So we, knock on wood, have very ever had any accidents, but we're very conscious of safety and sharing information. But back to the thing of that individual that I talked about. Since I'm taking advantage, and you can delete this if you want to, I think it's totally, I think our government is illegal. I don't think a Hispanic worker coming across the border is illegal. I don't think an Irishman coming over to work in California is illegal. I think invading a foreign country and locking people up in prison for minor drug offenses, I think that's illegal. I don't think being a hard-working Hispanic person cleaning someone's house or building someone's stone wall is illegal at all. Sorry, I have to put that in. And I also think that we have to defend and protect the people of Michigan and Detroit, because we asked them to build automobiles for us, and we're turning our back on them. So that's my taking advantage of you saying hello to my mom and dad for winning the Academy Award. Okay? Sorry about that, but I had to sneak that in there. Marlon Brando and the Indian, remember that? Sorry. Yeah.
Well, we need to have this kind of dialogue. I mean, we're at a critical juncture, I think, politically, culturally, not just in our country, but probably on a global basis. And so those people that have the wherewithal and the courage and the eloquence in many cases to talk about the reality of today. It's not all lovely out there.
No, it's not.
There are many fortunate people in the world, and there are many unfortunate people.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm fortunate. You know, I'm not in the 1%, but I'm very blessed. You know, I have a wonderful family, and I have a phenomenal. I'm somehow blessed with people that will work with me, and we work together on these kind of projects. It's really important to emphasize that this project was partially funded by the Burning Man organization and generously funded by the Burning Man organization with a grant. Burning Man also was phenomenal in their support of us as a crew in terms of providing us with equipment and moral support throughout the build. And we also have the outside community to thank who although we're not able to come to Burning Man, were able to support us on a Kickstart program. And without their help, we wouldn't have been able to build it. So it's a really wonderful thing. Our dream is the next projects for the Temple crew are going to be to build in 2014, we want to build a permanent performing arts center in Detroit with no permits. Yeah.
How will you pull that off?
How will we do that? Okay. Well, this is a secret. We don't want thousands of people to know our secret. But what we plan on doing is we have a friend that we're burying in the temple this year who worked on Forrest Gump. And you remember when Forrest was with Kennedy? Okay, in the film?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay, well, in 2014, there's going to be pictures of David Best with whoever's the president in 2014, congratulating me on building his new Performing Arts Center for Detroit. All right? So we're going to have posters, we're going to have PR, we're going to have our planning instructor. When we have our plans and our blueprints, they're all going to be in Hindi. So by the time they figure out how to translate Hindi into English, we'll have the temple built and gone.
Just keep them working, and then you just go do an end around.
That's right, yeah. They didn't ask for permission when they closed the factories. So why should we ask for permission when we build a park?
Now, you're absolutely correct to target and focus, I would say, Michigan, Detroit, and those manufacturing centers. But it's a big country here in America, and there are, people are not only out of work, but they're probably confused about how best to handle these kind of challenges that maybe they've heard about from their grandparents, but they've never faced themselves. Yeah. Kids are getting out of college and they can't find a job. I mean, what optimism can you share?
Well, I think that the optimism that I can share is that there's some food at my house. We can always put a little bit more water in the soup. And one of the things that these people have to know is that the most important thing that people want to do is work. It's not about money. It's about self-respect. Self-worth. And what we need to do in our country is build more projects for people to work on. The WPA or those public arts programs. And I mean, Burning Man organization is starting the Burning Man Project, which is to outreach and do that kind of thing. And with their support to other programs, we can't wait for the government to do that. We can't. We have to start it at grassroots level. I mean, the people in Detroit. When we built the project in Detroit, we didn't have. It's just like the first temple we built. We didn't know what we were doing. We can go back to Detroit now, armed with more information, more. There was a man that worked with us, who. God, I mean, we've had so many I've been to other countries. I've eaten in fancy hotels, restaurants. This guy looked at us and said, "This is the best week I've ever spent in my life." You remember him? He said, "This was the best week of my life." Building something in inner city Detroit. This young kid who'd probably never eaten in a fine restaurant, and we could go back there and build a performing arts center, and we could also teach him how to build a business.
Good food.
Good food. We thank the crew. We thank the kitchen crew, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Without them, we'd be starving. But, it sounds like a soapbox, but I think, when you ask that about how do we encourage them, I think, by giving them projects that make them feel like they're valuable.
Well, everybody wants to contribute too, right? So you get a certain satisfaction by knowing that you helped it get to an end.
Yeah. The other thing, since we're taking your nickel, and you can edit this if you don't want it in there, we were talking about soldiers and where our soldiers are coming from. And they're not coming from California. They're coming from the Rust Belt. They're coming from places where they have no money and no hope of escape except by joining the Army. That's where we're taking our military out of now. And those are the places that need. We don't need to build something in California, the wealthiest state. We don't need to build it in New York City or Manhattan or Colorado. And I don't want to discriminate against states, but the PowerPoints, the cultural PowerPoints in the United States are not the ones that need help.
They're not the ones hurting the most.
They're not the ones that are hurting. It's these places, where the factories are closed down and the kids are sniffing glue. That's where we need to build stuff.
Well, our country needs infrastructure rebuilding. Wouldn't that be just the most obvious thing? Why can't we get traction on that? I don't understand.
Well, we're going to trick them. You see, when we build the project in Detroit, we'll have someone with a suit on. And that's the evidence that you're legitimate. All right? So we'll use their tools for them. We can sneak in. It's like, the plowshares the sword into a plowshare. We're stealing the enemy's sword. We're going to steal the enemy's sword.
Well, and I think too, one of the things, I was having a conversation the other night. You go around the playa here, and you see so many, and you meet so many amazing people that are heavily engaged and proficient in the technology world. These are new tools that we can, in many cases, perhaps turn around back on, some of the established kind of infrastructure. So I don't know. I think there's optimism, certainly for me. Bill, anything that you'd like to just throw in there as a we're talking to people during the temple burn tonight and trying to get your perspective. I mean, it's got to be very satisfying. You invest so much blood, sweat, and equity and tears, and then you have to let it go. What's that all about?
But it's designed and built from the ground up, from the plans up, with the intention of doing exactly that, which makes it much easier to let it go. As a matter of fact, when we see it burn, we're also seeing the intent of the temple come to fruition, which is to take all those things that people have been thinking about or mourning about or has been weighing on them, go up in flames, and that's the intention of the temple. So it is actually, it's a sad, of course it's sad, but it's also a very joyous and very purposeful time.
One year when Larry Harvey changed the culture to a gift economy, I didn't like it. I said to him, I don't like it. I don't understand it. I like people trading me a poem for a ride in my art car. And then we were out at the temple. We had done 12 altars for people, and someone brought a suicide letter that they had had in their life for probably 35 years. It was a Vietnam letter, and it was a poem written by a young man who had a gun under his bed, and the poem was about the things that he had done. And he finally took the gun from underneath his bed and shot himself. And underneath the typed card, it was someone typed underneath the poem that their son had finally killed himself. And we go back 200 years to Africa, and in a village, a woman's son commits suicide, and she goes outside of her village, outside of her shed, and carves into the ladder on the side of her house a little image of her son. 200 years later, a collector goes to Africa, buys that, brings it to New York, and sells it at Sotheby's for $25,000. That suicide letter that those people trusted us with will never become a souvenir to be sold 200 years from now. And the safest way to protect it and guarantee that it'll never come back on them is that we put it safely into the fire. Okay.
Well, David, I've taken so much of your time. You've been so generous, and Bill, I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
And I think we'll find this very inspiring to listen to as we watch the temple burn on Sunday night.
Well, I have to tell you that this has probably been one of the, I think back to the point of me talking directly to you and making this, the questions that you asked me as genuine as I could to you, has made this one of the loveliest interviews I've had in a long time, and I want to thank you.
Well, that's quite a compliment.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
All right, very good.